kansa saa tietoa arkaa siitä, miten elää nyt.
Viime viikolla 13. päivä marraskuuta tuli käytännössä maailman suurille yleisölle selväksi, että maan ulkopuoliset sivilisaatiot ja niiden läsnäolo lähellämme on totta.
Welcome back. Congress returning to the Capitol and revisiting the topic of UFOs. Today's House Subcommittee hearing on UFOs, what the government now refers to as unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, was the first in more than a year. News Nation's Joe Khalil live for us on Capitol Hill. Joe, you were in the room for that more than 2-hour hearing. What did you learn?
Well, I can tell you this. If you are someone who is not familiar with this phenomenon, with this topic, what you heard in there was bombshell. There were multiple people, witnesses who under oath, and these are former military officials, some, talking about a program that exists within the government to retrieve crashed UFOs or UAPs that have been made by non-human intelligence.
Teen tästä asiasta nyt 3-osaisen videosarja, jossa käy lävitse tätä asiakokonaisuutta, eli sitä, että toiset sivilisaatiot ovat mitä todennäköisimmin totta, ja ne ovat käytännössä täällä. Ja että hallitusten sisällä on tästä tietoa, ja myöskin mitä todennäköisimmin tätä korkeamman tason teknologiaa. Tämä on ensimmäinen osa, jossa keskity, mitä tässä kuulemisessa viime viikolla tuli ilmi, ja etenkin mitä siellä ei kerrottu. Tämä on muutenkin asia, joka sisältää valtavasti epävarmuutta ja salaisuuksia.
And we will hear testimony today concerning recent revelations about a purported...
Tämän tilaisuuden nimi oli Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Exposing the Truth. Samankaltainen pidettiin viime vuonna. Tein siitä ohjelma. Linkki on tässä. Ja myös viime vuonna ryhdyttiin ajamaan läpi seuraavaa lakialoitetta. Otetaan pohjalle taustaksi tämä tästä erästä podcastista ote. Seuraavassa puhuu asiaa pitkään seurannut lakimies Daniel Sheehan.
This is the bill that got passed by the United States Senate in 2023. This is the 64-page bill that has set up an entire regime to undertake a controlled disclosure of some significant portions of the information that are known about the UFO phenomenon.
Controlled disclosure?
Controlled disclosure. That's what this is. This is the UAP Controlled Disclosure Act. This is what they're planning to do. They have a 7-year period during which they want to reveal some portions of the information and conceal information that they think would constitute a catastrophic disclosure.
Okay.
That's what they're engaged in.
Daniel Sheehan on lakimies, joka edustaa Louis Elizondoa, ja hän on työskennellyt myös UFO-asian taustoja jo 3 vuosikymmentä selvittäneen Stephen Greerin tukena. Viime vuonna valmisteltu lakipaketti käsittää pääpiirteissään ohjelman, jolla USA:n hallinnon ja sotilasteollisuuden uumeniin siiloutunut ohjelma tuotaisiin julkisuuteen. Tätä lakia ajavat niin demokraatit kuin republikaanit, mutta lain valmistelu on kohdannut kovaa vastustusta. Sitä kertoo Stephen Greer, mies, jolla on kenties laajin ymmärrys asian kokonaisuudesta.
All this is being turned over to the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services and House Oversight. Now, whether they'll actually get anything organized, do anything about it, I don't know. But later we'll talk about some initiatives that will sort of, I think, supersede what Congress is doing.
Well, one of the things you said, and by the way, like I want to make sure the listeners are listening, the disclosure project, not just 162, I think you just said, or 152 top secret facilities, but you already mentioned the numbers, but I'll say it again, 760 or so witnesses from within the government, from contractors, from military, 122, you said, UFO crashes.
All documented in there and illustrated.
And
you
so
see them.
You mentioned the government not knowing about this. So really talking about 2 separate governments, the official government that operates within Congress, that has presidential oversight, and then another shadow government that's happening outside of, illegally, unauthorized, outside of any oversight. And that's where the secrecy. So when people say the government's hiding UFOs from us, that's not necessarily true.
Well, actually, the government, excuse my language, couldn't find their ass in a well-lighted room.
Very true, especially this government right now.
No, it doesn't matter, any of them, because let me tell you a story.
Go ahead.
It illustrates it, because I like things to come alive instead of abstractions.
Yeah.
There used to be a famous astronaut named Gordon Cooper, and Gordon Cooper was a Mercury a hero astronaut early on. Mercury went up. And when he was out at Edwards back in the 50s, I think it was 56, there was a vehicle, a UFO, broad daylight, landed out there on a dry lake bed. We have his whole testimony, all the information. And he's one of our Disclosure Project witnesses, although God bless him, he's passed away now. Years ago, I was given a lecture to an organization here in Washington with him.
Okay.
And it was a legal group. They pick a lot of help pick a lot of the Supreme Court justices. But he pulled me aside and he said, the Secretary of Defense at that time was Cohen under Clinton. And so Cohen had contacted him and asked for everything he had, everything. And he did. And so what Cohen wanted to do, the Secretary of Defense, was find the footage because Gordon Cooper, his team went out and filmed this object that landed broad daylight and was looked at it, saw it, put it on a general's plane, flew it back to Washington. Now that was in 1956 or 7. The Secretary of Defense of the United States, with all that actionable information, details, got back to Gordon Cooper and said, that has vanished. I don't have access to it. And Gordon Cooper was astonished. I said, I'm not. I said, I have not met a single honest flag officer or general, admiral, who is on the right side of the law and is not a criminal, who has access to this. The only people who have access to it are, by definition, people who are running amok of the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the United States. And so I said, this is how the system works. Have there been some CIA directors who've known about this? Absolutely. But they're the ones who are curated and brought up through the system, and then they lie to everyone else about it. Have there been some senators? Yes. And I know who they've been. Are there some members of the House? Yes. And those are people who are in great peril right now because of something I'll share with you later.
Eli lähdetään seuraamaan tätä kongressin kuulemista tältä pohjalta. Olen kääntänyt muutamia pätkiä.
Are you familiar with my friend David Grush?
Absolutely, sir. I had the privilege and honor of working with him myself several years ago at U.S. Space Force.
Last year, as you know, he testified that the U.S. has run a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Are there UAP programs operating without proper congressional oversight?
100%.
What are they?
Unfortunately, sir, I would have to have that conversation in a closed session.
I know you said that, and a lot of people are frustrated with those kind of answers, but we're asking those kind of questions so you all know what the heck we're up against.
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video photos, other sensor information, and they have for a very long time. And it's not those fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear
High
images,
res.
high resolution.
How many visuals, graphics, videos, photos?
I mean, I've been told hundreds, maybe thousands. I mean,
Merkittävä osa kuulemista oli toimittaja Michael Schellenbergille vuodettu dokumentti nimeltä Immaculate Constellation. Ne, jotka seuraavat esim. Koronatilannetta, tuntevat Schellenbergin muun muassa Twitter-Files-tapauksen julkituonnista. Hän on muutenkin aktiivinen ja tärkeä henkilö kamppailussa tätä länsimaissa kehittyvää totalitarismia vastaan.
The original document from the Pentagon about Immaculate Constellation that Michael Schellenberger delivered to Congress today. So thank you, Mr. Schellenberger, for this information. We are all reading it in real time now, and Mr. Burchett will enter it into the record. But 12 pages about this unacknowledged special access program that your government says does not exist.
Immaculate Constellation on Schellenbergille tuntemattoman tahon jakama dokumentti. Hän todennäköisesti tietää, kenestä on kyse tai mistä tahoista on kyse, mutta ei journalistisen etiikan mukaan kykene sitä kertomaan. Muutenkin tässä asiassa on yleinen piirre se, että ihmiset eivät kykene näistä asioista suoraan puhumaan.
The report to Congress details in detail various UAPs, including spheres, orbs, disks, saucers, ovals, triangles, boomerang, arrowhead, and irregular organic. The report describes various incidents found in the human intelligence databases. One involved orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of its patrol area. In another incident, the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier watched a small orange-red sphere rapidly descend from a high altitude of 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of the CVN, or aircraft carrier. Another source came forward who told me that they saw a roughly 13-minute-long, high-definition, full-color video of a white orb UAP coming out of the ocean approximately 20 miles off the coast of Kuwait. It was filmed from a helicopter. Then halfway through the video, the person said the orb is joined by another orb that briefly comes into the frame from the left before rapidly moving again out of the frame. The person discovered the video on SIPR, the Secure Internet Protocol Router Network, which the DoD uses to transmit classified information.
Pääpiirteet tässä dokumentissa on kuten muuallakin tässä kuviossa, että näitä asioita ei raportoida kongressille, ja salaisuus on kompartmentalisoitunut, niin kuin siiloutunut, hallituksen virastojen ja näiden sotilasteknologiaa valmistavien yritysten sisään. Ja että tämä tieto ei kulje kongressille ja poliitikolle, eikä kansalaisille, vaikka pitäisi. Edes presidenteille tai vaikka CIAn johdolle. Dokumentissa tuodaan myös esille huoli siitä, että onko maailmanhallitusten sisällä tahoja, jotka haluavat luoda totalitaarisen järjestelmän planeetalle tämän teknologian avulla.
Schellenberger, I wanted to ask you, I think I understand from this hearing that you would agree that classifying information like this is not in the best interests of the people. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, with the caveat that, of course, I would support classification necessary to protect secrets essential to national security, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's overclassification.
Overclassification, yes. And so in most instances, if they can't tell us what, do you think at some point they'll at least tell us why?
President-elect Trump has repeatedly committed to greater transparency, both on the UAP issue, on JFK files, on COVID origins, and many other things. So I think that we need to make sure that the next administration is held accountable.
Donald Trump onkin jo useaan otteeseen vihjailut paljastusten tulevan.
One of the things that I want to talk to you about is the JFK files. And one of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
I think it's going to be just fine to open it. Let me put it that way. I think it's fine. It's going to be time. It's a cleansing, it's really a cleansing. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it immediately, almost immediately upon entering office. And I did partially open. I think I've opened 50%, but I was asked not to do it, and I thought that was a reasonable ask. But now I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it very soon. There's a lot of interest in it.
One of the things that
there's a lot of interest in the people coming from space,
Yes.
And I know you're interested in that.
Oh, very interested in that. How much did they tell you about that?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah.
What did they tell you?
Myös USA:n kongressin oversight-komitean kuulemisessa tuli ilmi, että ET:t ovat jo kauan tehneet selväksi, että ydinaseiden käyttöä laissa mitassa ei sallita.
Yes, sir. There's definitely enough data to suggest that there is certainly some sort of relationship between sensitive U.S. military installations, also some of our nuclear equities, and also some of our Department of Energy sites. There is a long historical record that some of your colleagues may have, documentation that demonstrates this. This is not a new trend. This has been going on for decades, and that information has been obfuscated, unfortunately, from folks like you in this committee. And I think that's problematic because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have a significant situation here. We have something that can enter into U.S. airspace completely with no attribution.
And how long has this been going on?
Sir, decades. And there's information that will hopefully be entered into the record.
Can you think of any possible reason why they can't release any information they have on something, say, 15 or 20 years old?
Sir, if I could echo my colleague here, Admiral Gallaudet, I think one of the big issues that we have in the intelligence community, Department of Defense, is we don't want to broadcast any potential vulnerabilities or weaknesses in our national defense systems or our intelligence collection platforms. Therefore, when you have a conversation where you address a problem for which there is no solution, it makes that a very uncomfortable conversation to have.
Has anyone made contact?
Sir, I'm sorry, could you specify?
Has there been any, to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble two F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace. And they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities and our nuclear readiness.
Is the United States government and our contractors, are they pulling technology from this? They're reverse engineering this?
Sir, as I previously stated, and please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was, after a very thorough review process by the Pentagon, what I wrote about. And that was my limit, unfortunately, that I was given.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sopassa on toinenkin puolensa. Ne toiset sivilisaatiot, jotka Daniel Sheehanin mukaan ovat rauhanomaisia, mutta eivät pidä edellä mainitusta toiminnasta ja muutenkin nähtävästi haluaisivat meitä auttaa. Pieni apu tosiaan kelpaisi ihmiskunnalle. Ohjusten käyttö alkaa olla holtitonta puolin ja toisin. Se, mitä kongressin kuulemisessa ei täysin tule ilmi, on Steven Greerin mainitsema mafia, joka on piiloutuneena hallitusten sekaan ja jolla on hallustaan tuota UFO-teknologiaa, eikä halua siitä luopua.
You know, that this is a dangerous situation that we've got here now. That we've got the doomsday clock. Now it's 90 seconds before midnight because the United States military now has moved nuclear missiles, the B-61 nuclear missiles, the mid-range nuclear missiles, into Germany and into Poland and now. And Putin has responded by giving a command to his field commanders now to train up the deployment and the use of tactical nuclear weapons in the field. And just last week, the Biden administration has now issued a what they call nuclear deployment employment executive order, preparing to put short fuses on 1,600 United States missiles. And that's why the doomsday machine now the doomsday clock has been put to 90 seconds short of midnight.
Jesus.
Okay? So the people need to understand that. And they need to understand that this is correlated with a major upsurge in the UFO surveillance of all of our nuclear facilities. Okay? And that they've demonstrated their capacity to shut them off. They've demonstrated their capacity, and they've demonstrated their capacity to be able to shut down our nuclear aircraft carrier
and in other countries as well.
That's right. And so that type of intervention, if it becomes necessary for them to intervene in order to preserve the life-generating capacity of our planet, so as not to be destroyed by thermonuclear exchange, that's going to reveal their presence. Okay, and that the national security state is not prepared yet for revealing their presence. So what they've done is they've come forward with this process right here. They've come forward with this process to figure out how they can choreograph releasing an adequate amount of information to start preparing our people so they can continue to utilize nuclear weapons as a threat to establish and control, maintain their control. That's what they're doing right now. So we're not being bamboozled by what they're up to here.
Oman jännittävän mausteensa asiaan tuo myös se, että kyse ei ole vain ydinaseesta, vaan myös siitä, että maan päällä on ihmisten joukko, tavallaan kuin mafia, jolla on hallussaan toisilta sivilisaatioilta kaapattua teknologiaa.
But this is also, so the people who are involved with this and getting this forward are the people who were part of ATIP and a part of OSAP.
That's right.
Before that. And those programs, regardless of however they morphed into each other, they talk all in skiffs. It's highly secretive. Guys like Hal Puthoff, Jacques Vallée are involved, some of the brightest minds in the world.
Yep.
But still, you say that specifically like some UFO crash retrieval groups in the Pentagon were far more secretive than that?
Oh, yes.
So how sinister is that stuff then?
Very. Very, and those are the people that we have to figure out whether we can get the people here that are doing this to be on our side, to be able to dig those people out and put them out of business. That's the key to this thing.
Do you think that's possible? Cynically, my head goes,
I do.
Think so.
I do. I think it's possible. It's a dangerous game because those people view themselves as authorized to use lethal force. And they view themselves as authorized to use lethal force against these people.
Right, yeah.
Okay? And so it's a dangerous game, but as Father David says, nobody gets out of life alive here, you know? And so that what we've got to do is we've got to be willing to put ourselves at risk in order to save the planet, okay? And to save the planet from a potential intervention which we're not yet ready for.
Yeah.
Okay, on the part of the extraterrestrial people. And so what we've got to do is start getting our people prepared for this so that it can be a positive relationship that we have with the extraterrestrial civilization. I mean, we've got to come to grips with this reality.
Yeah.
You know, and that what we have to do is we have to take steps to try to preserve as much agency as we can for our own sovereignty. As a species on our planet, you know, that we ought to have as much authority to make our own decisions as possible. You know, that if we're so stupid as that we've come right to the brink of an actual thermonuclear war that mandates the kind of intervention of an extraterrestrial civilization to come in and say, that's it, you've abused your authority, you're out of business now.
Right.
Okay? So the question is, you know, how much out of business are we going to get put here? You know, are they going to come in and take over entirely and say, look, you guys have threatened the destruction of the life-generating capacity of your entire planet. We can't allow that to happen. Okay, so you've lost your authority. You know, what we have to do as a citizenry is we have to demonstrate that we merit preserving some degree of agency over our own decision-making process. And the way that we have to do that is by taking care of these people and getting rid of them. Okay, that's what we have to do. We have to demonstrate that we're capable of mobilizing and getting rid of this elite that is threatening our planet for their own personal self-advantage. We've got to be able to demonstrate that, or else we've forsaken our rights.
Mitä kaikkea tällainen eliitti voisi vieraiden sivilisaatioiden teknologialla puuhastella?
Okay, so there are rumors that have come up to the Hill of a secretive project within the Department of Defense involving the manipulation of human genetics with what is described as non-human genetic material, potentially for the enhancement of human capabilities, hybrids. Are any of you familiar with that? Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
I am not, ma'am.
I'm not.
No, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Elizondo, you state in your testimony that, quote, advanced technologies not by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe, end quote. If these technologies are not made by any government, who's making them? Private companies, or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human intelligence?
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years, to put this in perspective,
are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
It may be both.
Okay.
When it comes to Blue Force Technologies, I would not be able to discuss.
Okay. Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?
We would have to have a conversation in a closed session, ma'am. I signed documentation 3 years ago that restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals. I submitted for my book through the DOPSR process, which took a year for it to be reviewed. And what is in the book is what I was told I'm allowed to talk about.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes.
Does the U.S. government have any reverse, okay, we already answered that question about retrieval programs. Do any U.S. contractors have the same?
I would prefer to address that in a closed session, ma'am.
Okay. In your book, you mentioned government employees who've been injured by UAPs, placed on leave, and receiving government compensation for their injuries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How can the government deny we have recovered craft if they're paying people because they've been injured by recovered craft?
Ma'am, that's a great question. That's why I think we're here again, because I've seen the documentation by the U.S. government for several of these individuals who have sustained injuries as a result of a UAP incident.
It's a crazy idea, right? The hypocrisy and the logic.
Koko tähän kuvioon kuuluu USA:n hallituksen puolesta perustettu jälleen uusi virasto nimeltä AARO, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, joka on hallituksen virasto tai osasto, joka on perustettu tutkimaan tätä ilmiötä. Ja kuten arvata saattaa, se on keskittynyt lähinnä selittämään asiaa pois erilaisina suokaasuina.
To date, AARO has over 1,600 UAP reports in its holdings from across the U.S. government. I'll share a slide in just a few minutes with updated UAP analytic trends. you'll see that many reports resolve to commonplace objects like birds, balloons, and unmanned systems, while others lack sufficient data for comprehensive analysis. Although only a small percentage of reports received by Arrow are potentially anomalous, these are the cases that require significant time, resources, and a focused scientific inquiry by Arrow and its network of partners. It is important to underscore that, to date, Arrow has not discovered any verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial beings, activity, or technology.
Moni Disclosure-liikkeessä sanoo Aaron perustetun salaamaan tietoja ja valikoimaan, mitä julkisuuteen jaetaan. Kun media kysyy ufoista, se kysyy Aarolta, hallituksen virastolta.
And who would we, so if you were in our shoes, where would you go from here? How would you get that information? A lot of times we just don't know who to ask because we don't know where to go next. So if you were in our shoes, where would you go?
Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. However, we established Arrow for that very purpose, and unfortunately, under its previous leadership, it failed. So one would hope that they would have the authorities necessary to do that. Let's hope that this new iteration of leadership will be successful.
Tänä vuonna Aarolla on uusi johtaja, mutta peittelyn ilmapiiri jatkuu, kuten tässä kertoo yksi todistajista, tohtori Gallaudet.
But the elements of the government are engaging in a disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Could you elaborate on that statement a little?
Yes, sir. Earlier this year, I met with the DoD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and what I thought would be a 90-minute meeting just to meet with leadership turned out to be an hours-long influence operation on me, where they attempted to convince me of the validity of the very flawed and error-ridden historical records report. In addition, they tried to have me question very valid UAP reports like the Tic Tac incident, and even coming to stating possibly that the Tic Tac was American technology. And then, of course, if you ask David Fravor or Alex Dietrich, the two witnesses, they were convinced it was otherwise. And then, and they also cast discredit on various UAP whistleblowers and witnesses to question their validity and credibility as witnesses.
Erilaisia tekijöitä tässä paljastamisen kuviossa siis on Aaro, hallituksen osasto, joka tuntuu taputtelevaa asiaa hiljaiseksi, ja eri puolilta tulevat pilliinpuhaltajat, joista Stephen Greerin taustalla on heitä eniten.
All right, the Washington hearings, Dr. Greer.
Yep.
What a past few days, and we're in D.C.
Yeah,
and it's kind of the day after, right?
It was what we thought it would be, a nothing burger, because we submitted 23 first-hand top secret guys who've actually handled the material, the craft, all that, and they didn't want to call any of them. So instead they called a professional disinformation expert, Luis Elizondo, and some second-hand people. Ben
Greer on tässä tiimeinen ulkopuolinen julkisesti, mutta hän briefaa muun muassa budjettia ja omien sanojensa mukaan monia muitakin poliitikkoja.
It begs the question of whether anyone in Congress is actually serious about disclosure.
Oma epäilykseni on, että taustalla on tämä Stephen Greerin joukko. Greerin näkemys asia on myös enemmän kuin vain tekninen. Kyse on lähenevästä kontaktista toisten sivilisaatioiden kanssa ja ihmisten tietoisuuden kasvusta mahdollistamaan tämän.
I view these civilizations out in space as people. They may be very different looking, they may be very different cultures, but they're people. They're intelligent, sentient people. And I think we need to get to that level of understanding and not project the divisiveness and the racism and all the tribal warfare of the last yuga onto the future. Yes. See, I think we need to go beyond that. And of course, the wise people of the last 100 years have all called for that, whether it be Gandhi or Martin Luther King or many figures as spiritual leaders. And I think that at this point, the public has to say, we're going to make this happen. And if we do, it's a collective conscious decision. So it's a choice. We're at a fork in the road here and been there for about 100 years looking at a big perspective, and we need to make the right choice.
If we can go down real briefly, do you believe, just for the record,
that the federal government, any part of the federal government, is knowingly concealing evidence about UAPs from the public?
Yes, sir.
100%.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I also want to just go down the line. I know many of you have already said this, but I just, for the record again, just briefly, what do you believe UAPs could be or are?
Strong evidence that they are non-human, higher intelligence.
I echo my colleague's comment, sir.
Genuinely do not know.
Don't know, but we must find out.
Toinen kuvio ja mahdollisuus tässä on, että tahot CIA:ssa ja hallituksen sisällä saattavat tehdä paljastusta omaan tahtiin, sekoittaa todellista tietoa pelottelun ja väärän tiedon sisään. Stephen Greer sanoo, että Louis Elizondo on CIA:n agendalla jakamassa yleisölle valikoitua tietoa, koska jotain tietoa on jaettava, koska asia on tullut jo niin suureksi, että on sanottava jotain. Paljastetaan video sieltä ja juttu täältä. Ja ovatko itse videot ja kertomukset tosia? Sitä ei voi tietää. Tietääkö Elizondo itse, onko hänelle jaettu todellista kuvaa ja tietoa? Sitäkään ei voi tietää.
The ultimate question really becomes this. For what purpose is the federal government overclassifying, because that's what they're doing, they're overclassifying, and forbidding the public for getting access to this? And if you know, if you have an explanation, I'm curious because I know what I've been told. I just want to know from your perspective, why do they overclassify? Mr. Elizondo, you look like you're finger on the button, ready to go.
Yes, sir. Forgive me. I think there's several reasons. I think at the time when this reality became evident to the U.S. government, we were in the middle of a Cold War with then Soviet Union, and we did not want to tip our hands to what our knowledge base was on this topic. We did not want to broadcast that to
the Cold War's long over.
It is, sir. It is, sir. There's also then the philosophical argument that the Department of Defense and the intelligence community is solution-oriented. And when you don't have answers, it's a really tough spot to be in.
It's easier to be quiet and suppressed than if you don't have the answer.
Indeed, sir. In fact, there's a very real example when we built the U-2 spy plane and flew it over then Russia, and we're taking reconnaissance. And when we first started flying the aircraft, it flew so high and so fast we thought they weren't tracking us. In reality, they were tracking every flight.
Oma kuvionsa on se, että mediaan tämä tieto ei leviä kuin pala kerrallaan, ja mediassa yleisesti asialle hekotellaan, etenkin täällä Suomessa. Eli tällaisessa ympäristössä tiedon kulkua yleiseen tietoisuuteen on hyvin helppo hallita sen, jolla tämä tieto on. Annanko tämän pala hänelle, jätänkö tämän? Louis Elizondo on joutunut allekirjoittamaan sopimuksen siitä, mitä saa sanoa.
Is the United States government and our contractors, are they pulling technology from this? Or they're reverse engineering this?
Sir, as I previously stated, and please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was, after a very thorough review process by the Pentagon, what I wrote about. And that was my limit, unfortunately, that I was given.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Eli sillä, jolla tieto on, ja koska tuo joukko on pieni ja salainen, jolla tieto on, niin heillä on valta ripotella tietoa, kuten heille on hyväksi. NASAn todistaja Mr. Gold piti tärkeänä asian taustalla olevaa tiedettä, joka voitaisiin saavuttaa. Tärkeää se onkin, sillä asiaan liittyisi muun muassa ihmiskunnan energiaongelmat ratkaiseva nollapisteenergia, josta myöhemmissä jaksoissa lisää.
A lot of non-believers in all of this would just ask a very simple question. Why? Why is it so hard? Right? Like, why are people, anytime they ask, why are they always thwarted? Why are they always judged? Why is they always have misinformation spread? Why is there always retribution? Why is it always met with an ear? What's the why? If it doesn't exist, why is it such a problem?
I think if you go through the history of science, Representative, it is always difficult for breakthroughs and new information, regardless of whether it's UAP or any other kind of discovery. And in science, we're supposed to be open, but when you break with the orthodoxy of what's believed, whether it's Galileo saying that the Earth doesn't rotate, or the Earth rotates around the sun, or the sun doesn't rotate around the Earth, it's always challenging for new beliefs. And the more extraordinary those discoveries, the more extraordinary those new beliefs, it's very difficult. So I think this is natural. There's natural conservatism that when it comes to science, but this issue in particular has been very difficult where, again, even to attempt to study it becomes problematic. But every hearing like this, every news report, every video, documentaries. I was privileged to be part of something Dan Fair is putting together. I think many of us have interviewed for it, documentary over 30 different government officials. Every brick in the wall will help get us closer to getting to the truth.
I appreciate that.
To these aircraft being piloted by whatever they might be, non-human biologics, would you agree that it's likely that they are being piloted by some mind-body connection?
Ma'am, I think it is safe to presume here that they are being intelligently controlled because some cases seem to anticipate our maneuvers, and in other cases they seem to, I came across an email where the word stalked was used in a very secure email between Navy officers discussing their ships being pursued by a UAP.
In our previous panel, we had Grush, and he had testified to say that some of these were interdimensional beings. Can you speak on that at all?
Ma'am, I'm not qualified, certainly as a scientist or otherwise, to speculate points of origin. I looked at everything from a scientific perspective. So if you look at, for example, instantaneous acceleration, which was one of the observables of the program that I belong to, ATIP, the human body can withstand about 9 G-forces for a short period of time before you suffer negative biological consequences, blackouts and ultimately redouts and even death. Comparison, our best technology, the F-16, which is this older platform, but one of our most highly maneuverable aircraft, manned aircraft, made by General Dynamics, can perform about 17 or 18 G-forces before you start having structural failure, meaning that the airframe begins to disintegrate while you're flying. The vehicles we're talking about are performing in excess of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Gs.
Jarrutellaanko asiaa julkituloa siksi, että systeemin sisältö jarrutetaan? Vai halutaanko pitää omaa teknologiaa salassa? Vai jarrutellaanko asiaa siksi, että totuus asiasta olisi ikään kuin ontologisesti liian suuri pala suurimmalle osalle väestöä? Syvästi uskovaisille ihmisille tämä asia on vaikea pala. Pelätäänkö levottomuuksia? Vai jarrutellaanko tätä vain siksi, että näissä virastoissa on vuosikymmenien salailun kulttuuri, ja ylipäänsä esimerkiksi armeija ei uskalla puhua siitä, että taivaalla pyörii jotain heitä tehokkaampaa. Luulen, että kaikessa tässä on totta. Siksi itse luottaisi eniten tämän niin kuin virallisen prosessin ulkopuoliseen, sillä virallinen paljastamisen prosessi on aina hallittavissa sieltä laatikon sisältä. Laatikon ulkopuolella toimii Steven Greer jo 3. vuosikymmentä.
I cannot help but be excited by the potential for such an endeavor since scientific discovery is driven by anomalies. It's the existence and study of anomalies that led to the theory of relativity, quantum mechanics, and nearly all of humanity's scientific breakthroughs. This is why the study of UAPs should be embraced, since whatever is occurring, the chance to garner new knowledge should never be ignored. We must be thorough in collecting information, fearless in making conclusions, and open to following the data, no matter how mundane or extraordinary the results may be. I began this testimony by praising the Joint Subcommittee members for their courage, and I will end by echoing that sentiment. As the saying goes, the truth is out there. We just need to be bold enough and brave enough to face it.
Seuraavissa osissa käydäänkin lävitse tätä virallisen ulkopuolista tarinaa. Ja tätä olenkin käynyt läpi tässä artikkelissa, mitä kaikkea se voisi sisältää. Kiitos vaan, jos tämä aihe, jota suurempaa ei ole, kiinnostaa, niin tilaa kanava ja minun työtä voi tukea tuosta linkkeistä alla.
If we reach into our higher consciousness and we go forward with a strategy that isn't based on materialism and greed, this is a massive undertaking, my friends. But I'm convinced we can do it, but we have to completely rethink how we live, how we act, and the whole business model of what we're doing. And if we do that, here's the world we're going to have. We will be remembered as the generation that pulled ourselves off the extinction line of the Hopi prophecy and moved on to the one that goes on forever.
Guns aside.